You know that moment in an argument when the words just stop? The other person is talking, their voice is rising, and you know you should respond, but nothing comes out. You freeze, you shut down, you disappear inside, and then comes the label. Yet you're passive-aggressive. You're doing this on purpose. It's impossible to argue with you. But you don't feel like you're doing it on purpose. You simply can't speak. What if it wasn't a character flaw? What if psychology and neuroscience already had an explanation for what happens to your body during a conflict? And that explanation said much more about how you process threat than about something broken in you? This video was made for you. Whether you're someone who freezes completely without understanding why, someone who learned to stay quiet as a child, or someone who chooses silence with full awareness. Stay with me. Let's start with what psychology actually says about this. You're not cold, you're not manipulative, and you're definitely not passive-aggressive. What happens to you during an argument has a scientific name, it has a mechanism, and it has an origin. There are 3 groups of people who stay silent during conflicts. Each group has a different story, a different root, and a different meaning. And chances are, you'll recognize yourself in at least one of them. Once you know which group you're in, shame starts to turn into understanding. The first group is the frozen nervous system group. Imagine the following scene. An argument begins. The other person's voice rises. And inside your body, something changes before you even realize it. Your heart races, your thoughts get scrambled, and the words, the ones that were right there that you needed to say, simply vanish. This isn't you being difficult. This is biology. Dr. Stephen Porges, a neuroscientist at Indiana University, developed a theory called polyvagal theory. This theory describes 3 states of the autonomic nervous system: the safe and social state, the fight or flight state, and the deepest state of all, freeze. Here's what that means in practice. When the brain perceives a threat, whether real or perceived, the nervous system can go into a complete shutdown mode. And in this mode, verbal processing literally stops working. Speech isn't a choice you're refusing. It's a system your brain shuts down to prioritize survival. It's the same mechanism that makes animals play dead. An ancient survival circuit, not a personality decision. And science confirms this even more directly. Researchers at the University of Washington, led by John Gottman, discovered that when the heart rate exceeds about 100 beats per minute during a conflict, the ability to process rationally and access language drops significantly. Gottman called this emotional flooding. And when the body is flooded like this, it can't have a conversation. It can only survive. The body prioritizes survival, not sabotage. Think of the nervous system as a circuit breaker. When the load gets too high, it trips. Silence isn't a decision. It's the breaker cutting off. You're not holding on to hidden anger. You're not punishing anyone. Your nervous system is doing exactly what it was programmed to do: protect you. Have you ever stopped to think that your silence might be your nervous system trying to protect you, not sabotage you? But there's a detail few mention. Not all frozen silence comes from the same place. Not every freeze has the same root, because the nervous system doesn't learn these responses in a vacuum. And that's where we get to the second group. The second group is the childhood learned silence group. Let me paint a scene. You're 7 or 8 years old. There's a fight at home. The atmosphere gets heavy. The adults around you become unpredictable. Voices rise. And you discover something, not with words, but with your whole body. If you speak, the situation gets worse. If you disagree, the temperature rises. But if you stay quiet, if you shrink, if you disappear, the storm passes faster. You didn't make this decision consciously, but your nervous system did. Bessel van der Kolk, psychiatrist and author of The Body Keeps the Score, spent decades documenting how threatening environments in childhood embed themselves into the nervous system in ways that persist into adulthood, often without the person realizing it. The body never forgets. The child who learned that speaking makes things worse learns to survive through silence. And this learning doesn't go away just because they grew up, got married, or are 40 years old. And that's where the perspective shifts. The The silence you carry today might not be yours. It's the silence of a child trying to survive the chaos of someone they loved. The child who became invisible during the chaos became the adult who disappears during fights. Not because they don't care, but because silence once kept them safe and kept everyone else around safe too. This isn't emotional immaturity. It's an ancient intelligence still running a script that once made perfect sense. The question now isn't whether that script was right or wrong. The question is it still yours? Or does it belong to someone you knew when you were 7 years old? But not everyone who stays silent is stuck in a freeze or running a childhood script. Because now we come to the third group, and this is the most surprising one. The third group is the strategic processor group. Think about this situation. You're in the middle of an argument, short of breath, a tight knot in your throat, and you know that if you open your mouth right now, you're going to say something that you can't take back. So you shut down, not because you've given up, not because you don't care, because you've already learned the cost of speaking when you're at your limit. Some people stay silent during arguments not because they freeze, not because they were programmed that way in childhood, but because they've learned that speaking when the nervous system is at its limit causes destruction they deeply regret. Words you can't take back. Phrases that stay in the memory of the person you love for years. Back to Gottman. When physiological arousal is too high, language becomes a weapon, not a tool. Speaking in this state doesn't resolve conflict. It makes it worse. And Gottman's research shows something even more specific. The nervous system needs more than 20 minutes to regulate itself after being triggered like this. 20 minutes, not 30 seconds of deep breathing. Dan Siegel, a neuropsychiatrist and creator of the concept of the window of tolerance, explains that everyone has a zone where the nervous system functions in a regulated way, where it's possible to listen, process, and respond with clarity. Outside of this window, communication stops being productive. It becomes reactive, impulsive, and destructive. But what's the difference between choosing silence and simply running away from the conversation? That line exists, and it matters. Strategic silence is the choice not to speak when your hands are shaking. Think of a surgeon who stops in the middle of a procedure because they realize their hands are unstable. They aren't giving up. They aren't being a coward. They're protecting the patient from a mistake that can't be undone. The strategic processor does the same. They aren't running away from the conflict. They're protecting the relationship from words that, once spoken, cannot be fixed. This isn't avoidance. This is emotional intelligence applied to conflict. But pay attention to this point. Everything I've said so far is true, but it's not the whole story, because not all silence is equal. And this is the part that requires real honesty. There's a difference between silence as a pause and silence as a wall. Silence as a pause is temporary. It exists so that the conversation can truly happen, when the nervous system is regulated, when words can be heard, when the connection can be restored. This silence returns. It invites resolution. It keeps the door open, even if it's closed for now. But there's another type of silence. John Gottman calls it stonewalling, which he identified as one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in relationships. This silence doesn't process the conflict. It uses absence as punishment. It negates the other person's presence until they give in, apologize, or drop the subject entirely. The naked truth is this: not all silence is equal. Silence that pauses to protect, that's a boundary. Silence that punishes to control, that's a wall. And walls don't know how to distinguish between the good and the bad. They block everything. You might recognize yourself on both sides at different times in your life. This isn't shameful, it's useful, because the difference between the two is the difference between protecting a relationship and slowly destroying it in silence. The honest question is this: when your silence ends, does it open a door? Or does it keep someone on the outside until that person does what you want? So, let me give you 2 questions for you to take with you. First, when you stay silent during a conflict, does that silence eventually end in a real conversation? Or does it simply make the subject disappear without resolution? Second, does your silence exist to protect the connection or to control the outcome. If your silence freezes because your nervous system perceives a threat, you're not passive-aggressive. You're a self-regulator with a reactive nervous system. If your silence comes from a childhood where speaking wasn't safe, you're not cold, you're not immature. You're running an old script, and old scripts can be rewritten. If your silence is a conscious choice to protect what you say, you're not avoidant. You're a strategic processor. Silence has a name. It has an origin. It has a logic. Understanding it is the beginning of choosing it, instead of being controlled by it. If this video made you feel seen, leave a comment telling me which of the 3 groups you recognized yourself in. I read them all. If you want more videos like this, subscribe. The next one might explain even more about you.